the number of followers and the number of likes. I don't think those are things that CROs should be paying attention to necessarily. We want to be looking at the things that are truly outcomes and driving revenue. So conversion rate was one that I was kind of listening for just to see how that would come up for people. But I've always cautioned people, it's good to know potentially what your conversion rate is at different periods of time.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. CROs are responsible for meeting their numbers, making sure their teams are hitting their quotas, or they will struggle with their own. Also, they need to have control of the entire funnel, starting from the lead acquisition to signing the contract. But sometimes the journey may start well before that. Also, the customer journey could be different per industry type. So which are the KPIs that they need to master in order to meet their numbers? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss top KPIs for CROs. We discussed the best KPIs that CROs should be measuring. Finally, we discussed how the KPIs might differ for a CRO depending upon the industry and the stage of their company. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you are joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to digital transformation. And for this year, we are focusing on KPIs. For today, we have the title that is supposed to be the master of KPIs. It's going to be Chief Revenue Officer. They really need to have their numbers down. If they don't, then I don't know how everybody else can track those numbers. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my intro. If you still don't know me, Sam Gupta, your host and principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Cristiano, and we have Chris and Chris problem today, so I think I'm going to use full names.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, Chris Garridini, president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. We're a 29-plus year Microsoft Dynamics implementation partner, so KPIs are part of the world we live in. So glad to be here.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. And then, Christina, can I move to you next for your intro?
Absolutely. Chris Harrington, Gen Alpha Technologies. We are a company that helps original equipment manufacturers sell and service their equipment and parts online. So really excited to be here today. CRO should be a fun topic. Thanks, Sam.
I love it. And after a long time, I think we are going to have a little e-commerce flavor. So we will probably have a little disagreement, from the e-commerce perspective as well. And then we have Dave. So it could probably be IT versus OT as well. So on that note, thank you so much, Christina, for being here. Dave, I'm going to move to you next.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. And thank you once again for trying to set me up for an argument, which I feel like you do on every single show I'm at. For everyone who doesn't know me, I do more than just argue with random guests that Sam assigns. My name is Dave Griffith. I run a company called Kaplan Solutions. Our focus is typically on the plant or industrial floor, and our main goal and focus is to help manufacturing and industrial companies run more profitably. So we spend about as much time working with sensors and equipment on the plant floor as we do designing KPIs and helping to make sure that data is both logical and correct.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. Abu, can I move to you next for your intro?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. My name is Abu. I'm the president at Pani Management Tech Corp. We are Sage X3 partners since 2009. We've helped a lot of companies, implement sales process, improve sales process in a wide variety of industrial sectors. Happy to be back here in the new year, so looking forward to discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Abu. And if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. And we typically try to cover them during the show. If you don't have time, then we make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, I am going to start with the first question, and I'm going to set the stage a little bit overall from the CRO perspective. I think, my feeling from this room is going to be that there is going to be a little debate in terms of what CRO really is, and the role of CRO, in my mind at least, varies per industry. For example, let's say, and I'm going to bring the layer of B2B versus B2C because a lot of people might be thinking that CRO is all about B2B, but obviously the B2C matters as well from the industry perspective, and the role of a CRO is going to be very different when you compare these two because they are very different overall from the sales process perspective. And size is always my favorite, topic. So, Chris, I don't know if you feel comfortable starting today.
I'm good.
Yeah. So the top KPIs, and if you can dissect
Sure.
based on different industries, what you have seen in your experience. Obviously, every industry, every size is going to be different, and the CRO role is
Right.
going to be different. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so the big one is implied in the name, the chief revenue officer. The biggest KPI that he can have is revenue, and it is a big one. And everybody's like, really? But you can slice and dice revenue so many different ways. A couple other favorites. Retention's an interesting one too. Is you look at, okay, how much of your revenue mix is coming from existing customers, new customers, and what's your retention rates, and then pipeline's a good one. As you look at, there's a lot of KPIs that surround pipeline and additions, velocities, win rates. It goes on and on and on and on. So, but let's just talk about revenue because revenue is one of my favorites. And I don't care whether you're a CRO, president, owner of a company. We all need to look, but revenue, and by industry, right? And again, even with the revenue, this mix, is it existing? Is it new business? If you think about repeat, what percentage of my revenue comes back from the prior customer? Meaning, I'm trying to grow 20%. How do I calculate new business needed to get growth if the customer are static, or maybe they grow 5%? But mix is one. If you look at streams and you go back to the type of business, the SaaS business, right? Software as a service. They're all about what's my monthly recurring revenue, my annual recurring revenue. So they're trying to do valuations and basis based on what's that MRR, monthly recurring revenue, and then they annualize it out, and that's a big deal for them. And then there's other ones even in our industry, in professional services. Look at revenue is a good metric. Is you look at and there's other ones that related to revenue. They're indirect realization. You look at utilization, realization, kind of indicators there as well. But that's a great example. Is you just what are the different streams of revenue by industry, and even what do I do? B2B, B2C. What if I do both? Okay, well, retention rate on B2C may be really low because they buy once, they never come back. Retention on commercial customers may be very high. And then, as you within the mix that you're selling to the customers, there's another component there. As you look at, again, recurring, and it may not be SaaS model, it may be maintenance related. You think about, okay, so again, we're looking at revenue mix in terms of, is this new sales? Is this service to existing customers? Maintenance agreements is parts. So even organizations that are cutting through that, they're still trying to get granularity. And then what else? I didn't talk about profit margin. Okay, because we're not focused on top line. So, as you look at these different revenues from these different dimensions that you would look through, you're looking at different components within those in terms of margin, profitability, right, and other costs. So again, a lot of different things that you can slice and dice there. But like I said, revenue is the big one. If you go back to pipeline, again, what is it? Win rate, velocity, ads, what's coming out of the pipeline, conversion rates. There's so many little components in there. And as we were starting to say, this marketing analytics that I walk from left to right, is a CRO interested in that? Yeah, he is, because it's effectiveness and it's ROI. And, as you look at the different, metrics along the way, they imply a different part of the business is responsible for this. Meaning, is this a problem with demand gen, or this is a problem? I'm not getting conversions. I'm getting conversions. I'm not getting contracts. Or do I have a failure? But again, as you think about that left to right analytics, each metric along the way is going to tell you there's different people responsible for that. And I think, again, if it's his job at a macro level, bigger organization, mid-size, it really doesn't matter. Or do I have a problem in my process? Hey guys, our conversion rates dropped. And so even to have comparatives, what's my baseline? And am I establishing benchmarks? Otherwise, hey, that number looks good. No, it doesn't. But if you had a benchmark, you'd see that it's below the benchmark or it's above the benchmark. So I think a big ingredient in this as well is this role is setting benchmarks, setting targets to compare baseline, and moreover to get alerts. Hey, guess what? This one moved. All of a sudden, something changed quickly. And I think as we talk about, I've talked about a lot of metrics. The rest of you will have a lot more to add. But which one do you look at, right? Whoop. We're not going to color code because some people are colorblind. So we're going to anyway. That's good.
Yeah, great start, by the way. And I'm going to do some build up there, Chris, and maybe you can follow up with some more commentary there. So here, one of the variables that I always look at when it comes to revenue. And revenue, when you think about it in the way you were describing, it's all about dollars. Once you have dollars on the table, it's just easy to figure things out. But when you look at, let's say, the smaller deal versus bigger deal, okay, the bigger deal is always going to be much harder to sort of acquire and chase. And for the bigger deals, when you look at, and they have named the term called dark social. I don't know whether you have come across that before or not. Now they are calling dark social. And the reason why it is called dark social is because it's a very dark, dirty, depressing road that nobody wants to travel. It takes a long time and there is no KPI that you can really associate because you can measure. So I don't know. I mean, when you
so
look
you're
at
about big transactions, right? The ones that take longer lead times. Is that what you were describing? Is larger transactions?
So larger transactions, where do they start? I mean, see, ads are not going to work. Your activity is not going to work. When you talk about really, really expensive deals, because they have very unpredictable pipeline. So when you are talking about pipeline, if you have something, okay, this is my ad, I'm throwing $5, I get something back, easy peasy, you can measure, okay? But not every single deal. For example, let's say if you're selling very expensive machinery, you are selling ERP deal, you are selling something that is going to be super cross-functional.
Sure.
They are very, very, very hard to attack, and that's probably the reason why they are so expensive.
That's right. That's right. And so to your point, you almost in that context of pipeline where you get into the types of in the matrix, right? Small, medium, large, and we got different metrics there, but you look at selling cost tolerances. And I think that's part of managing a sales pipeline is what is my sales investment based on deal size and based on probability to win. So there's a few other components in there that help you mathematically, okay, good one, bad one. Okay, how do I come up with a rating system that says I'm going to bet on this one because we do that. And to your point is not all our transactions are large, but they are substantial. And I've had deals that take 2 years. Okay, how do you measure it? How do you cost it? And again, even in our world, we set up projects to track costing. Big deal. We call them out and say, this is one we need to track that. We need to manage it. But even the team rationalizes, well, how much time can we invest in this? We have to build a proof of concept. Yeah. Oh, how much is that? Thousands of dollars. We're going to fly someplace. Thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. And again, you proportionally invest on deals. So that's really what you're asking is our KPIs to help you govern over sales investment. And again, we're beyond marketing. We got the lead, but now that we got the lead, it's okay. What are we willing to bet to try to win? And you got to pay to play. Everybody knows that one, right? But you want to hedge that. And I think that's where you're going. Did I answer you correctly on that?
Yeah, you definitely did. And I like the bit that you mentioned that you should be tracking, especially when you are doing the expensive deals. And I don't know how many deals you are doing like this where you have to do the POC. By the time you are done with 10th, I mean, you probably would have spent like millions of dollars. And if you don't win anything,
we're careful. I think that's the point is you're careful. And I guess your org size as to how much overhead you can absorb. I'm a smaller business, so we have to pick the deals we win or we chase. And even when somebody throws me an ungodly, I can't name names, but I got this RFP and it was related to an existing client. He goes, "Did you get it?" I go, "Yeah, I threw in the trash can." He goes, "What?" "Well, it was a 2.5-inch governmental deal." And I'm like, the absurdity of the cost. And if you win it, you don't want to win it. So, but there's a great example. Now, was that a little subjective? Might have been, but I think you're still trying to apply a metric to how does the deal show up? Where did it come from? Because even as we go back to sources, and we talked about marketing sources will influence how much I'll invest in a transaction because it changes the quality of the deal, right? Somebody came in inbound, hey, I'm column fodder. Okay, if I'm way out there in column H, all right, I'm not going to spend a lot. But if we're the guy that's setting column A, okay, you know what I mean? And so again, not everybody's sophisticated to track those things. Again, certainly we've taken advantage of our CRM platform to add those different attributes. We can kind of empirically rationalize it as opposed to just taking a wild guess.
Could not agree more. And CROs are all about rejecting more than accepting, and that's what makes a seasoned CRO. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Christina, I'm coming over to you. In your world, things are going to be a bit different overall. And again, I mean, you talk a lot about in your B2B world, the deal size is going to be different. But when it comes to the e-commerce itself, I think the process is going to be slightly more transactional. I don't know if you have to do something like what Chris has done to track his cost. I don't know if POCs are going to be involved, but it could be very interesting in terms of what you are seeing in your space. So anything you might be able to add from the CRO perspective, the top KPIs, and anything from your experience. Christina, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, Chris covered a lot of that, but I'm going to try to build on top of what he said. And really, what I think when we talk about revenue, we're really trying to measure revenue growth. So, not just revenue, the dollars themselves, but if a CRO has been brought into an organization, typically they are going after new growth. So, yes, everybody's measuring revenue, but we want to build on top of what we have. As we consider all of the different ways that customers companies are going to market today, I think we have to measure revenue by channel, right? So we need to understand the value of all of the different ways we're going to market, and we're trying to close deals, for lack of a better word. And I want to know margin by channel and average order value by channel. So when I'm really looking at revenue, I want to understand which channels are performing the best. Hopefully I have good measure of my cost per channel, so I can also start to evaluate where I might want to put additional efforts, or at least understand the expansion and opportunity across these different channels. So in the bucket of revenue growth, and then the measurement on each of the channels. In the industrial companies that we often work with, especially equipment manufacturers, market potential and market share are really critical for a CRO. It's one thing to say our revenue grew 13%, but what if your market potential is 50 more percent than what you're getting today? Your market share is significantly below your market potential. Maybe you want to have a better business growth plan and therefore a better business strategy to go after your potential and gain more market share. So just knowing my revenue growth isn't enough information for me as a CRO to really go after and identify where my opportunities might be for that extra revenue. So understanding your market potential, especially with OEMs who have an installed base, who know, might be buying equipment or machinery, and also their installed base of equipment, machinery that's operating, and the parts and service components that go with that. If you know the life cycle of those machines and you understand and calculate that market potential for your parts and service, you want to compare what's my revenue to my market potential and go after it. So to me, those are really key. Something that wasn't mentioned, order hit rate or search to order hit rate. So, if there are 100 searches for a product, but only 10 converts in a given period of time, I'm only getting 10% of the total searches. That's key for me to know, because now I might have a pricing problem, I might have an inventory problem, I might have a product information problem that I need to correct. CRO needs to understand what products do customers want to buy, but they are not buying, or they're buying all the time. Now I might have a pricing opportunity. So 100 out of 100 searches are coming my way as orders. Now I might be able to increase my price and grow my revenue, grow my margin, so forth. So I love to talk about hit rates. To me, hit rates are really key for CROs. Something that was mentioned on the customer satisfaction side, but I agree is a really key metric is your customer retention rate. So the opposite of that would be customer churn, of course. That's identifying how many you're losing. I want to measure, am I retaining my customers? Because it's a lot easier as a business. I think we all inherently know it's a much more costly endeavor to go after new customers and grow the existing customers. And then with that is customer lifetime value as a KPI, because that's going to help me segment my customers. So if I have a bunch of customer lifetime value that rate is high, I might bucket some customers in there. I might have tiered pricing structures or earned discounting or earned benefits, whatever it might be. And then I might have others that are at a lower rate. I would also argue that I need to know that market potential for those customers, because sometimes you might have a very large customer who's spending a lot of money with you, but their overall, again, in the industrial space, their equipment might be that they own 75% of the competitor's equipment. So do I want to be rewarding them if I'm only getting 25% of the market share, even though they're spending a lot with me? So again, understanding all these KPIs is really critical for me to put a tier structure together and how I'm going to reward these customers that I continue to do this with. So those are some additional ones that I put out there.
Okay, amazing insights there. So I'm going to, provide some layers there, and then probably you can have some follow-up commentary. Love the layer about channel. I think that is super important. Each channel could behave very differently, so you need to have separate KPIs for all of them. Market potential, market share is very interesting. Okay, you are going to have these marketing teams present to you that we have the market share of $1.9 billion or $10 billion. And I'm like, okay, where are you going to find your next deal? I don't know. So market share is great, but you really need to know your market share. What's the real market share you have? You can't simply go by some of these random reports. Obviously, they are great, but your market share is your market share. It cannot be the industry market share. So I don't know if you have any sort of insights there in terms of tracking that.
Just maybe, Sam, just to comment on that one. That's why I mentioned industrial manufacturers as very specific to that kind of market, because they typically do know in a given year this many equipment are sold. And they're often, like for specialty vehicle manufacturers, a lot of those VINs have to be registered. So you know very clearly there are registries and other information available that tell you how many of a thing were purchased, and you can see how many of your thing were purchased against that. So then you have the whole good potential there, but then your installed base that goes out into the market, and then your aftermarket opportunity comes from that. There is a way to be directionally correct on what that potential is and evaluate how well you're doing, especially if you categorize your components and your equipment very well. I've seen growth happen in businesses when they get to this detail, and it is an important level in that industrial space. Now, in technology, much harder, right? You might be thinking about the SAM, the serviceable available market. We've kind of looked at that, and, what really can you service based on the type of products that you offer? So in technology, it's a lot more difficult to sometimes understand some of those things. So that's how I would clarify that market potential, market share comment.
Yeah, and great addition there, by the way. And you are absolutely right. When you are going to be working on the physical goods, forecasting your demand is going to be far easier because those are the goods that you are selling. But I'll make just one comment, Chris, and maybe if you have any sort of counter comment there, you can offer the commentary there. I did one episode with folks in the automotive sector, and I'm always curious. These people are talking about these new technologies, and they were like, okay, AI is crushing in my technology. And I'm like, okay, why is it crushing? What are you doing so special? And these guys were like, okay, when I am looking at my demand, I know that when these in the automotive space, there are going to be many different reports and agencies, and they typically publish the forecasted report in terms of how many cars they are going to produce in a given year. And based on that, everybody's sort of going to inherit the demand. And you know what the comment was from the AI perspective? They said those reports are 50% off. Can you believe this? And I don't know, because you are in the aftermarket industry, so you probably would know far more than I do. But they were like, no, these reports are always off. And that's why we need to sort of make up the numbers based on the AI. And that is the problem they are trying to solve. So I don't know if you can relate with this. This is true or not. Christina, over to you. Any follow-up comment?
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to my directionally correct comment. What I will say is a lot of companies I've met, first, they do not have the output that an automobile manufacturer has. When I'm speaking to OEMs, it's a much smaller scale. They typically know how many their manufacturing in a year, the information can be much clearer. They can glean what is the aftermarket expected revenue for the 10 years that product is going to be installed and running, and what it's going to consume both in service and aftermarket. And when you're speaking of much smaller volumes, that information you can get much closer on. So I can see how, if again you're talking to automobile manufacturers where it's a much different demand, you have to think globally, you have to think about all the different vehicles that are out there, that might be incorrect. But for manufacturers who are maybe manufacturing 100 units and shipping it 100 units a month, they can handle this type of calculation and easily get their arms around it. And I would encourage them to try.
Amazing insight. Thank you so much, Christina, for those. Dave, I'm coming over to you. Now we have a lot more build up overall, from the KPI perspective. But when I look at from your lenses, I think it's going to be very different in general, the kind of industries that you serve and the kind of companies that you are dealing with. So I don't know, what are going to be top KPIs from your perspective. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. So I would say a little bit more from my perspective. With the manufacturers that I work with, outside of the logos that everyone knows, CROs are either something that is very new and or may not necessarily exist, right? So I'm seeing some of those coming in. Historically, I see more of like a facility or plant manager, maybe like a CFO, something along those lines, more into what we're calling the CRO role. I am seeing more of those, and it actually makes me happy, because if they focus on revenue and profit, I mean, for me, it means that there's more opportunity, but it also hopefully means that it is good possibilities for those organizations. So as I look at those, and I think Chris kind of got a bunch of the key ones, right? I look at revenue, I look at sales, I look at pipeline, and I look at retention. It's kind of the big four. We talked a lot about ARR, annual reoccurring revenue. And on the software side, and for some services and solutions that I have and partners that I work with, absolutely ARR. I was remarking a couple of days ago, I've seen that this very interesting kind of bell curve, right? So 4 or 5 years ago, absolutely no one wanted to go buy anything that was recurring costs. And then manufacturers kind of at some point said, yes, let's go buy things that are reoccurring costs. It's going to save us money up front. Some large OEMs have basically just said, if you want our stuff, you've got to buy it on reoccurring service contracts. And just recently, within the last couple of months, I'm working with a client. They're doing, $500 million worth of build over the next 2 years. And their biggest thing, the one thing out of the proposal that they pulled out is, we could not possibly pay this as a reoccurring cost. We can pay 20x more up front if it's just a set cost, but we can't possibly look at reoccurring costs. So I'm almost wondering if in the space and the lens that I'm looking at, we're kind of seeing the backlash to everyone is going and trying to sell everything as a service. So I find that AR specifically as interesting, but I would say revenue, and maybe projected revenue, and to Chris's point, sales and service, total customer lifetime value. I think all of those are very important, because most of the time, if you go and sell a machine, or if you go and deploy a series of technology, you're going to do that, and maybe you get another opportunity to do it again as quickly as 10, assuming everything goes well, they don't need another one to expand. The next opportunity may be, 10, 20, 30 years from that point. But the sales and service and support opportunities are huge. So I would say revenue, absolutely. And then I think both Chris's basically got all of my notes that I had. So congratulations for putting two people in front of me who did just an outstanding job on this. But I specifically like pipeline, right? And so as I look at KPIs, I look at leading and lagging KPIs. And when I go work with people to build KPIs, one of the most frustrating things is that we typically look at lagging KPIs, or we look at kind of best guess historical projection. I like pipeline because I like pipeline and bookings, because that is a forward-looking KPI. So typically, you're going to have some percentage of the next 6 to 12 or maybe longer months booked under contract with particular people. And then historically, I see especially high volume manufacturers go kind of slot in companies who typically come and buy some percentage of their throughput opportunity, and that is what they have as bookings, and then they know where they are as compared to where they can be. And sometimes it's hey, you're putting a little bit of more pressure on the sales folks, or hey, can we go slide around a couple of client opportunities and get some of this done sooner, or hey, can we go push this out further if we've got something like protective capacity in order to allow us to go through the process of bringing in a rush critical order. So I like pipeline. I think that's really valuable. I think that's maybe not something that most small to medium sized groups like I work with look like. And then as I look at it, I look at kind of like the customer lifetime value and all of those retention items that we talked about, whether you are a Fortune 5000 or whether you do $10 million a year, at some point you have to know what a customer lifetime value is. To Chris's initial point, you've got to go focus on the A's, right? Like you have to know what your ideal customer is. You have to know how much the customer is worth for you. And if they're a good customer, you've got to know if they're going to continue to work with you over the lifetime of it, or are they going to come once every 20 years and say, hey, Sam, I need to go buy this one thing. I'm going to buy it. You're going to ship it to me, and then we're not going to go talk, and maybe I have a correct contact information 20 years from now when someone sends another email or whatever communication we are using in order to go ask for a proposal. When I look at that, I also look at, hey, how easy is this going to be, right? So are they a good customer, or are we going to go jump through a bunch of hoops? Kind of to everyone's point, in my industry, I've worked on a lot of deals that are, 16 to 24 months. That is a not uncommon sales cycle, and you have to go understand how much of your time and resources you're willing to commit into going and doing the work, going and continuing to build the relationship in order to hopefully win that contract at the end. And what do those opportunities look like? And there have been more than one time in my career where I've looked at it and I've realized, hey, we probably should have stopped this process like 6 months ago. I don't know why we continue to do this. We're going to go just stop this now. And if they want to go talk to us when they're ready to go purchase, then we can have an actual conversation to that point. But I've done, I don't know, $50,000 of free work up until this point. At some point, you have to stop the bleeding. And I actually had a comment to your earlier question, Sam. I think you asked, hey, how do I know the right person to get in front of, and how difficult some of this marketing is? I mean, you could do the same thing that most large groups have done for decades. Is you've just got to go hire and way overpay someone who golfs with the CTO of whatever company that you're looking for. That, in my opinion, has been the tried and true method for many, many decades.
Yeah, so some very interesting layers there. So I'm going to touch on them quickly, and then if you have any follow-up commentary, you can offer. Number one, 50K, just 50K. Dave, Chris is probably spending 50K on every single deal and wondering, and one of them is going to close. The other layer that you had mentioned is about not having CRO in some of the industries that you work with. And sometimes I wonder, and I think you were referring to the job shops, the machine shops, those are the core manufacturing facilities. And sometimes I wonder that I probably should get into manufacturing business, because these guys don't have to worry about selling. They are like, okay, can I print these parts? If I'm not able to print them, I'm not going to accept the work. So that's why they probably don't have a CRO. The other comment that you had mentioned related to Industry 4.0, I think that is the second industry that you were referring, that they are moving more towards the subscription-based business model. In general, the subscription-based business model is probably the hardest, okay? Most people don't realize it from the revenue perspective. Great. But the KPIs that you need to track and the compliance that you are going to have, I know Abu and Chris are going to get kicked out of it, okay? It's a nightmare to get into the subscription-based business, because now we are looking at ESC 606 compliance. Again, when you are a $5 million business, I don't think anybody cares about it. But when you are going to be 50, 100, things get a little interesting in the...
So I guess I would say on those smaller to medium-sized shops, I see lots of groups in the $1, $2, $3, $400 million a year range that would generally fall into your description of job shop. as well, Sam. So there are certainly kind of a large range of opportunities there. And I would agree, selling kind of the subscription-based services are absolutely difficult. I see lots of people moving towards those. And on the kind of legacy business, this is how we do it. We want to buy the software and own the thing and not have to worry about it. I think that makes sense. I see some amount of pushback because at some point groups need to make money to continue to have customer service, to continue to, go build that code base, things that lots of the ERP folks here, I'm sure, are very familiar with. Legacy industrial automation software has been, I'm literally going to go. I had a group less than 12 months ago send me a dozen CD-ROMs, and that's what the software was on, Sam. I actually had to go out and buy a CD-ROM drive in order to plug into the laptop in order to go download the software. I think they've moved away from it. So, but when I tell you that this, I don't know, $20 billion a year company, this is how they're sending out software licenses historically. This is how most people are sending out software licenses historically. If you go back not too many years, you can actually go typically see like they will send you a whole stack of floppies if you go far enough back in the sales catalogs. So there are certainly lots of opportunities when we talk about technology. But for me personally, I'm excited to see kind of more of the technology shift into those even $500 million a year organizations.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dave. Abu, coming over to you, in your industries, the kind of KPIs that you are seeing, I'm pretty sure it's going to be really interesting. My understanding is that you focus primarily on food, agriculture, pharma, etc. And those are completely different industries from the KPI as well as from the sales model. Abu, over to you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just a comment on the subscription model. I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard that BMW started doing subscription on heated seats. You guys in the US, it doesn't matter to you, but here in Canada, they started, if you don't pay a subscription, you don't get heated seats anymore. So everybody's trying to do it. I'll just, most of the revenue factors or the CR KPIs, all three have done a great job. We've talked about it. I just want to dig a bit more into, some companies not having a CRO and not having. I mean, from my perspective, CR is more strategic, right? The sales director is more, let's get the sales up, which in turn obviously means revenue. But CRO is probably more broader defined, right? He's looking at the entire process chain from marketing right down to delivery and after service to see how we can maximize revenue. So a lot of those factors are KPIs are, customer focused, leads coming in or going out, or the revenue or the average cost of the customer or the average revenue of the customer. Another important aspect from a CRO perspective would be more internal. So, for example, are you able to fulfill the orders? Especially in distribution industry, we had a client where they had all these, they were meeting all the KPIs on the lead front, on the order sign up front, on getting the sales order. But when they wanted to fulfill it, there's no stock, right? There's no inventory. So, and now that's a different kind of problem, right? So what do you do, right? So we need to have the system and the demand planning in place. So for certain industries, that perspective, that those KPIs also become very important on the internal side as well. On the agriculture side, on the yield is a very important factor, right? If you don't have enough yield, you do not have enough product to sell. So you can be booking orders or you can be forecasting it, but when it comes time to sell your product or your crop or when the cannabis is ready, the yield is not there. There's not enough to sell, right? So those sort of factors come into play. The other companies that do is how much are you selling per square foot of distribution warehouse? People are becoming vertical focused, right? They want to maximize it. There's a company out here based in Calgary actually who have built robots so that you can climb higher, you can go higher vertically upwards rather than having more horizontal space in the warehouse, right? So they'll have robots which go like to 50 feet, pick up product or to put back product. So from my perspective, every industry differs. Even if you're in the same industry, your business model is going to differ. So from a CRO perspective, it's important to map that entire process chain from the start, the leads coming in, looking at the quality of the KPIs. We have talked about bookings, and interestingly, a call came to me from a very large software vendor where the person who was calling me literally begged me to book the meeting because that's how her KPI was, right? How many bookings did she get? And now she knows I'm not interested in the software, but she booked me up with the sales rep. So again, you're acing that KPI, but why isn't the sale happening, right? So from the CRO perspective, those not only the KPIs, but the quality of the data collection around KPIs, making sure the rewards are in the right, adjusted the right way. You're not just get rewarded your people to just gain the KPIs, right? It's also fairly easy to do that. So for looking at that holistic perspective of your business, and then figuring out what do we need to do repeatedly well in order to grow the revenue. That could be bookings, that could be conversions, that could be operational efficiencies. What if you're getting too many returns? So you're getting the revenue, but you have a high rate of return, right? So looking at that aspect as well to figure out.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great commentary there. By the way, I really like your bit overall about worrying about the inventory. And a lot of people are going to say that, you know what, if the sales orders are coming in, I'll fulfill whenever I can. It's a good problem to have. No, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. That's not a good problem to have because the customers are going to realize that, you know what, you are not able to fulfill and you might not come back. And that's what I think there is going to be a little layer overall in terms of the retention as well as from the return rate. So that's not a good problem to have in general. The yield is also sort of related with the inventory problem that you mentioned. So you need to have everything in balance. And in my mind, that is still very supply chain. The meeting one is very interesting as well. Okay. I have had cases where the VDR was ready to pay me for the meeting. And I'm like, okay, why are you paying me? And she's like, okay, I need to book the meeting. I make money by booking the meeting. And I'm like, okay, how much are you paying? And she's like, I'm paying $50. I make $500 in setting up. So huge ROI for me.
Yeah.
What is the ROI for the company?
Company. Yeah.
So I don't know if you are going to have any follow-up comments there, Abu, based on my build-up.
Yeah, I mean, so supply chain is an important issue, right? I mean, for example, even in the COVID environment, right, a lot of companies could not sell because the supply chain is not there, right? So all the KPIs are really important from a sales perspective, or the value of the customer and so on. But one important thing, like part of the CRO's responsibility, not necessarily the salesperson, like the sales director or the sales VP, but the CRO's responsibility also look at other organizational factors as well to make sure that we can maximize revenue. I mean, we are in the consulting world, right? So oftentimes a lot of work comes in, we do not have consultants who fulfill it. So you can increase the revenue, but we do not have the internal resources to fulfill it. And what happens eventually, people go off to some other firm, right, to get that fulfilled. So I believe that's an aspect which sometimes gets overlooked a little bit, at least from the revenue side. On the booking side, I mean, yeah, I mean that's so common. That's the way people are rewarded. We have been bitten by it. Like we have used companies, and very quickly we realize we're getting a lot of meetings, but not people who are willing to buy, right? So, and then we stop that process altogether. So, yeah, I mean, so making sure as a CRO you're investing in the data quality as well, right? So you're getting an excellent KPI, but if the quality of the data or the way you're tracking or the incentives are not right, you may not be the end of it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Abu, for that. So, Cristiano, obviously, coming over to you again. And in this section, we talk about the meaningless KPIs. We have 15 minutes, so I think we can do either comments over comments, any disagreements.
You said meaningless KPIs?
Either meaningless KPIs or any comments over comments, whatever you want to cover.
Well, I think I'll make just a couple comments. Abu, about he nailed it. And you're like, are you focused on the front end KPIs, or are you looking at the back end customers performance related ones where, if he's revenue and shipping performance is behind, your cash isn't hitting based on your forecast. So that's a great correlation. And again, then are you measuring back orders? Again, is he looking at some of those operational metrics to infer customer service? Because those are soft indicators. But the CRO, we go back to retention, and and retention is related to promises met. Hey, I gave you I miss all my ship dates. And so those are big deals. And I'm glad Abu brought those up. But sometimes it's not, they're almost indirect KPIs. They're not indirect, but they're not the ones that are on top. They're like, all right, revenue looks great. Is it accrual based or is it cash? And again, the other thing that we didn't bring in is should the cash component be part of the revenue metrics? And you're like, yeah, because what they're doing, everything's booking is accrual, right? The bookings, the fake bookings, those are accruals. They're not real. until we have cash. And so I think that's the one thing is we look at sales order fulfillment. Well, that's really a cash indicator, right? Because we're done. Now, it doesn't mean I got paid for it, but it means I completed the transaction. I have an entitlement, meaning, you know what I mean? But I think that there's a couple different types of KPIs we're talking about. Are they the fluff ones or are they substantiated? I think that's a big differentiator as you're trying to look at quality of data and can I count on it, right? Is it going to move? How do you know? That's the other one is what was the KPI? If I relook at that KPI, did it move? What? And again, I think that's a inherent understanding. And how are you articulating your KPIs? Can they be such where they're so empirical based that okay, it's not going to move, meaning it's a good predictor, as opposed to. And again, I'm adamant about accrual based data these days because I've had some whoop, it moved. I'm like, okay, what happened? And again, we're trying to count on things, and I think that goes back to that quality is how well can we count on the accuracy of the information? Because if we're going to make decisions based on it, it better not move, right? Because if I make a decision and come back and say that changed, that's hard. So bad KPIs, inaccurate. I mean, it still comes from meaningless is really that they haven't been validated. And do they create an action? Are they're distractions? And I think I'm the guy that, people look at 10 things, they get 2. All right, let's have the 2 most important ones. And again, the ones that actionable. What are the actions that come out of that? I heard returns. That's another one where great sales. Hey, I'm sorry. Again, returns are a big deal because again, what do they also talk about? They talk about problems in possibly in manufacturing and design. And why is that important? Because if I'm the revenue officer and I don't remediate that, guess what? More cost. We're looking at revenue, but if we're not tracking the cost side of that, we're losing P&L profitability. So these are again, top line, great revenue, great, but this backside one on returns and even the actions that come off of the KPIs and remediation. And what is it? Is it due to customer service? We ship the wrong stuff. Okay, we can fix that. We can fix people. And I think, as you think about, is it defects? Okay, let's go to manufacturing. So I think that, and again, our revenue officer, I'm concerned about that stuff because high return rates, you're right. It's a big problem. You work too hard to sell. Returns mean you're losing, you're churning, and so there's a few of those there. But I think I'm just pointing out other ones that would be top of mind. Okay, they're not the obvious ones because we go back to the CRO. He's in the $1 billion company, right? What's he looking at? Is he seeing a KPI that says, well, what is our return rate and why? What are the reason codes and how are we remediating it? And are they trending down? Are they trending up? Right? Are we improving or are we not improving? But and I think whether you have a CRO or not, I think a lot of things we've talked about today are imperative for any business, small, medium, or large, and I think people are probably hearing, they're like, well, how do I measure that? How do I get my hands on that data? Do I have to manually compose those? A lot of systems don't come out of the box with all the KPIs. That's one of the challenges in the lower tier products. And in the upper tier products, guess what? They don't build them because, everybody wants something different. So you still have to imagine and build out a lot of this stuff. So keep that in mind as you're shopping for, where's my dashboard, easy dashboard, right?
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Chris. So, Christina, I'm coming over to you. Any comments that you would like to cover?
Yeah, I think one that I'm really glad we didn't bring up, or I didn't hear anyway, and this one might be controversial, so it'd be interesting to see if anybody has any comments on this. But I often talk about being very cautious about measuring conversion rate and always expecting conversion rate to go up. And this is specifically when you are selling online because you can typically measure traffic and then you're measuring the numbers of orders against that traffic. And in a self-service environment where you are building a self-service platform where you are assisting customers with a lot of information, sometimes your traffic there, the actual benefit to them was not to place an order. It was to do other things that are really beneficial for them. That could be paying invoices. It could be checking order status. It could be checking bills of materials for information, getting work instructions. It can be watching videos. So, time on site and some of these vanity metrics that we get caught up looking at, even when you look at social posts, like the number of followers and the number of likes, I don't think those are things that CROs should be paying attention to necessarily. We want to be looking at the things that are truly outcomes and driving revenue. So conversion rate was one that I was kind of listening for just to see how that would come up for people. But I've always cautioned people, it's good to know potentially what your conversion rate is at different periods of time. But ultimately, if you're expanding your digital presence, you're doing more, you want people coming there for multiple purposes, and a conversion doesn't always equal an order. So I'll bring that one up.
Yeah, love the controversial comments in general. And so thank you so much, Chris, for that. Dave, coming over to you. Any comments over comments?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of what I would call bad KPIs, Sam, and I feel like I'm the only sucker that always comes prepared to go be killed on the internet with what I would call bad KPIs. I think everyone kind of brought up good ones. I would call them like vanity metrics, right? Yeah. So Abu talking about the bookings, Chris talking about the conversion rate and hoping that people will continue to convert more. I know some people that go chase logos, and I would say that to some extent it could be valuable to some particular groups, right? Like if you are starting and you need to go chase a logo and you're willing to go give someone basically the product for free so you can go put the logo on their website, that potentially has a place, right? There's potentially opportunity to go look at these vanity metrics. But as you're looking towards long-term success, I would say kind of all of the vanity metrics, not something that we should be looking or tracking on a dashboard of a top five. I would also say, and it goes to a story I have, kind of trying to go and niche down too much, looking at way too many, way too specific items. So I worked for a mid-sized manufacturer's rep and distributor. Great group. I tell this story because it's funny, right? So there were about 1,000 customers, which was a fairly decent size. But for whatever reason, we sent out 13 different variations of the newsletter. And then we would go track the 13 different variations of the newsletter. And some of these variations literally had like 25 people on them. Obviously, 1,000 into 13 means that we average less than 100 people. And I look at them and I'm like, the end number is so small. It basically makes literally everything that we're doing insignificant. We can't guess if this sentence or these two words actually would translate. So, but before you go down kind of subcategorizing everything, make sure that you have enough data and make sure that you have enough, customers or pieces in order to give you results that are valuable.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Dave, for those. Abu, coming over to you. Any comments over comments? Any more meaningless KPIs? I think you already provided one.
I mean, there's no, like every KPI has value, right? It's an indicator. But getting stuck on that KPI, that a higher KPI will result more sales, that's where it becomes. So we have to put the thought process behind, are we capturing the right quality, the right data? What does it mean for us? Is it the right KPI for our business? I was talking to my SEO team, and SEO people, they like to say, okay, you have 500,000 impressions, which is 150% more than last year, right? But what does it mean, right? So impressions basically mean people coming visiting my website. To get impressions, I can open up my company's office in a mall and I'll get way more impressions, right? But that is not going to mean that I'm going to get way more ERP sales, right? So it's thinking behind those metrics. What does it mean? Are we encouraging the wrong things? So that is also something we have to analyze in every metric. And I believe there's no right metric for every company. It's a range of metrics and it changes, right? If you have a very mature sales process, you have a very accurate sales process, you've been around for 20, 30 years, your metrics are going to be different compared to a startup or compared to like somewhere in the midlife cycle of the company life. So again, trying to figure out what's the overall organizational strategy, right? Is the organizational strategy right now to get more logos, or is the organizational strategy right now to increase sales from current customers, right? So again, the KPIs change, right? So again, we have to make sure we are tying everything together: the organizational strategy, how we want to grow sales, are we capturing the right KPIs, is the data quality in the KPIs good, are we incentivizing to gain the KPI, right? That's a very common challenge in any industry.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Abu, for that. So the only thing we can take right now is going to be closing advice and any more comments you guys might have. So we probably have 1 minute each.
So dimensions and measures. So if you think about just breaking it all down, and we didn't talk a lot about dimensions, but if you think about the CRO, what's a dimension? It's, there's different attributes throughout our data points. And I think as you look at what's a dimension, a region, a sales rep, product line, a facility. I mean, there's a country. It could be, there's lots of different concepts of dimensions. It's like, what do we pivot on? What do we measure? I've got a group I'm working with. They're like, well, we have regions. Okay, so they like regions and they like product lines, and those are a couple of their dimensions. But as they aggregate data from products and customers, and they start looking at it, they look at a state, a product line, they just different types of dimensions. Measures are what? What do we calculate? Okay. Is it just a rolled up value? Is it sum? Is it a more complex calculation? But I think it's imperative as an organization. And as I said, a lot of this is greenfield where did somebody invent it? Is there one I can go borrow? I see one. Great. I need that one. Maybe they're pre-built, but just understanding those two concepts, I think, is imperative. Architecting, what am I really measuring and how am I measuring and what are my pivots where I can look at it based on.
Love it. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Christina, any closing comments, closing words?
Yeah, I love the dimensions comment too. One that I thought about in preparation for this right for the end is employee satisfaction. There is growing evidence that employee satisfaction has a positive correlation to revenue. So as we think about our entire business and how satisfied our employees, we know it has an impact on revenue. So how are you measuring that employee satisfaction?
Okay, love it. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Dave, any closing comments, please?
Absolutely. I would say that we talked about a bunch of very interesting and very diverse types of organizations at a whole bunch of different levels. And it feels like we go back to kind of some of the initial comments of everyone's flavors of these KPIs change, but looking at something that is revenue, looking at something that is sales, looking at pipeline, looking at something that is retention are 4 really good indicators of how your organization is.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. Abu, closing comments, please?
I think it would be important to capture the right KPIs. Sometimes organizations become so focused on KPIs that the data and the effort required to capture those dashboards becomes more, it becomes more costly than what's returning, right? So as the salespeople, everybody's focused on the KPIs rather than trying to figure out the right KPIs, having the right system and process.
Love it, guys. Thank you so much. That's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another topic. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Chris Gherardini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's CORNKEYTEC.com. If you want to learn more about Abu Asif, head over to pennymanagement.com. It's PANNIMANAGEMENT.com. If you want to learn more about Andy Pratico, head over to ESSoft.com. It's ESSOFT.com. If you want to learn more about Chris Harrington, head over to GenAlpha.com. It's GenAlpha.com. If you want to learn more about Dave Griffith, head over to dave-griffith.com. It's DAVE-GRIFFITH.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.